The jungle was already awake long before the sun rose. Thick air hung low over the ground, heavy with heat, moisture, and the quiet tension of men who knew something was coming. It was early morning, July 21st, 1944, on the island of Guam. Somewhere beyond the tree line, engines coughed to life, low and mechanical, breaking the silence like a warning. Japanese tank crews, hidden under layers of camouflage netting and palm leaves, listened closely. Then one of them chuckled. Another joined. Soon,
If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below.
quiet laughter spread through the concealed positions. They had heard those engines before. Slow, heavy, American, Marine Shermans, and to them those tanks were nothing to fear. At least, that's what they believed. You can almost feel the sweat rolling down their necks as they waited, fingers resting lightly on controls. Boots pressing against metal floors, still warm from the previous day. The Type 95 Hago tanks they commanded were smaller, faster, and easier to hide in this dense jungle. They had fought before, in China, in Southeast Asia, against enemies who had little to match them. And now, here, they believed the Americans had brought lumbering machines that could barely move through the terrain. Machines they thought they could outmaneuver, outsmart, and destroy. But something had changed. Back on the American side, just beyond the beachhead, the 3rd Marine Division was preparing to push inland. Among them were crews of M4 Sherman tanks, assigned to support infantry units moving into the thick jungle. These men were not new to fear. Many had already seen combat in places like Tarawa, where tanks sank into sand or were knocked out within minutes. They knew the risks. They knew the jungle would not be kind to them. Visibility was almost zero. Enemy positions could be just a few yards away, and Japanese anti-tank teams were skilled, patient, and deadly. Still, they moved forward. The engines of the Shermans rumbled louder now, cutting through the dense vegetation. Branches snapped. Leaves trembled. The ground itself seemed to vibrate under the weight of these machines. Inside one of those tanks, Sergeant William Carter, a tank commander from Ohio, leaned forward slightly, eyes scanning through the narrow slit of his vision block. He couldn't see much, just shadows, movement, and the shifting shapes of jungle foliage. But he knew the enemy was out there. He always was. At the same time, just a few hundred yards ahead, Lieutenant Hiroshi Tanaka and his crew sat motionless inside their Hago. The metal interior was cramped, the air thick and hot. Sweat soaked through uniforms, pooling at the base of their helmets. The smell of oil and fuel mixed with the damp jungle air that seeped in through every small opening. Tanaka had studied American armor before this battle. He knew the Sherman existed, but most reports he had received described it as tall, slow, and vulnerable at close range. In theory, in a jungle like this, his smaller tank should have the advantage. That belief gave him confidence, but confidence in war can disappear in seconds. At around 700 hours, the first Sherman broke through a line of thick brush. Its turret slowly turned, scanning left and right. Behind it, 2 more followed in a staggered formation. Infantry Marines moved alongside them, crouched low, rifles ready, eyes darting through the jungle. The air was tense. Every sound felt louder than it should be. Every shadow looked like a threat. Then, suddenly, the jungle erupted. A sharp crack split the air as the first Japanese tank fired. Its 37-millimeter gun flashed, and the shell slammed into the side of the lead Sherman. Sparks flew, metal rang. But the Sherman did not stop. It kept moving, tracks grinding forward, engine roaring. Inside the Japanese tank, there was a moment of confusion. That shot should have done more. Lieutenant Tanaka quickly ordered another round fired. This time, the shell hit the front armor of the Sherman. Again, sparks, again, noise. But still, the tank kept advancing. And then something shifted. Inside the Sherman, Sergeant Carter had already identified the source of the fire. His gunner, Corporal James Reed, adjusted the aim of the 75mm main gun. The turret rotated smoothly. The jungle parted just enough for a clear shot. "Fire!" The Sherman's gun roared. The shell tore through the foliage and struck the Japanese tank directly. The impact was immediate and devastating. Flames burst from the thin armor. The tank rocked violently. Smoke poured out as the crew inside scrambled, but there was no time. In seconds, the tank was burning. The laughter was gone. What the Japanese crews had not fully understood, what they had underestimated, was the difference in firepower and armor. The Type 95 Hago, designed years earlier, was never meant to face something like the Sherman. Its armor was thin, often no more than 12 millimeters. Enough to stop small arms fire, but not a high-explosive shell from a 75mm gun. And in the jungle, where distances were short, that difference mattered more than ever. Another hidden detail worked against the Japanese crews. Many of their shells were designed for lighter targets or older vehicles. Against the thicker frontal armor of the Sherman, especially when angled, penetration was far less reliable. Meanwhile, the Sherman's gun, even with standard ammunition, could destroy a Hago with a single well-placed shot. The balance of power, even in close jungle terrain, was not equal. The battle quickly became chaotic. Japanese tanks fired from hidden positions, trying to use the terrain to their advantage. But each time they revealed themselves, even for a moment, they risked being spotted. And once a Sherman had a target, it didn't take long. Another Japanese tank fired from the flank, hitting a Sherman's track. The American tank shuddered and slowed, but it didn't stop. Its turret swung around, almost instinctively, and fired back. The return shot struck the Japanese tank near its turret ring. The explosion lit up the surrounding jungle, sending debris and smoke into the air. Marines on foot took cover, firing into the brush, trying to suppress enemy infantry who were supporting the tanks. The sound of gunfire echoed in every direction. It was hard to tell where one fight ended and another began. You can almost feel the confusion, the heat, the noise pressing in from all sides. Amid the chaos, communication became critical. American tank crews relied on radio coordination, calling out suspected enemy positions, guiding each other through the limited visibility. Infantry units signaled targets with hand gestures and shouted warnings over the roar of engines. This coordination gave the Marines an edge that went beyond just armor and firepower. Lieutenant Tanaka watched as another of his tanks was hit. Flames rose quickly. Too quickly. His grip tightened. This was not how it was supposed to go. The Shermans were not slowing down. They were not easy targets. They were pushing forward, methodically, returning fire with devastating effect. He gave an order to reposition, to try and flank again, but movement in the jungle was slow. Branches blocked paths, mud trapped tracks. Visibility was poor. And now, the Americans were fully aware of their positions. Another Sherman fired, then another. Each shot carried weight, power, finality. By mid-morning, the battlefield had changed completely. Several Japanese tanks lay burning or abandoned. Smoke drifted through the trees, mixing with the humid air. The ground was torn up, marked by tracks and craters. The sounds of battle had shifted from sudden bursts to scattered gunfire. The Marines continued to advance. For Sergeant Carter and his crew, there was no sense of victory yet. Only focus, only the next threat. He knew the Japanese would not stop. They rarely did. Even without tanks, They would continue to fight from hidden positions, from trenches, from caves, but the illusion had been broken. The Shermans were not weak. They were not easy targets. And in this environment, with trained crews and coordinated support, they were something far more dangerous than the Japanese had expected. As the hours passed, the jungle revealed more of its dangers. Hidden anti-tank teams armed with magnetic mines and satchel charges crept through the undergrowth, waiting for the chance to get close. Some Marines would later recall hearing faint rustling near their tanks, only to realize moments later that an enemy soldier was just feet away. In this kind of fighting, distance meant survival. American crews adapted quickly. Infantry stayed closer to the tanks, protecting them from close assaults. Machine guns on the Shermans scanned constantly, firing short bursts into suspicious movement. Every shadow became a possible threat. Every silence felt unnatural. Later that day, as the sun climbed higher and the heat became even more intense, reports began to spread among Japanese units. The American tanks were advancing deeper into the island. Their armor was holding. Their guns were overpowering. The early laughter was replaced by something else, concern, because now the reality was clear. This was not the same kind of war they had fought before, and those machines they had once mocked were now burning through the jungle, one position at a time. As the days went on, the pattern repeated itself. Japanese forces attempted counterattacks, often at night, using whatever armor they had left, but the results were often the same. The Shermans, supported by infantry and sometimes artillery, proved difficult to stop. Night brought a different kind of fear. Visibility dropped even further. Sounds carried strangely through the jungle. Japanese units often used darkness to get closer, launching sudden attacks aimed at disabling tanks at point-blank range. Some Sherman crews reported hearing footsteps, whispers, even tapping sounds on the hull of their tanks in the darkness. Sleep became rare. Tension never faded. On July 25th, near the Orote Peninsula, another engagement unfolded. Japanese tanks attempted a coordinated push against Marine positions. It was meant to be a decisive strike, but once again, the Shermans were ready. The fighting was intense, close range, and brutal. But by the end of it, several more Japanese tanks were destroyed, their thin armor no match for the American guns. During that engagement, Marine tank units worked closely with artillery observers, calling in fire on suspected enemy positions. This combined pressure made it harder for Japanese forces to regroup or launch effective follow-up attacks. Each failed counterattack weakened their overall defense. The cost was not one-sided. Some Shermans were damaged, some crews were lost. The jungle remained a dangerous place. Every movement carried risk. Every advance could lead into an ambush. But the balance had shifted. The Japanese crews who once laughed now moved with caution. They knew what they were facing, and they knew what could happen if they were exposed, even for a moment. By early August, the organized resistance on Guam began to collapse. The island was declared secure on August 10, 1944. But the memories of those early clashes stayed with the men who were there. For the Marine tank crews, it was a lesson in adaptation. They had learned how to use their machines in terrain that was never meant for tanks. They had learned to work closely with infantry, to rely on each other, to trust their training. For the Japanese crews, it was a harsh reminder that technology, when combined with coordination and experience, could change the outcome of a fight very quickly. And beyond Guam, these lessons would carry forward into future battles across the Pacific. Each island would bring new challenges, new terrain, new tactics. But one thing had become clear: underestimate your enemy, even for a moment, and the cost could be everything. The jungle had not favored one side as much as they had hoped, And in the end, it wasn't laughter that echoed through the trees. It was the sound of burning steel.
If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below.